Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. We are excited to host this webinar about the new Notice of Funding Opportunity for the NIGMS IPERT program. And you will see listed here, this is the new NOFO number, PAR 24252. And today you will hear from three IPERT program officers. So I am Kalinda Gonzalez-Stokes, and Drs. Sedella Blatch, Alexander, and Joyce Sam are also here. From Grants Management, we will have Jennifer Lynch joining us, and from Review, Latarsha Carithers. If you could please go to the next slide. So some just general information about the webinar before we start. The webinar video and slides will be made available on the NIGMS website, so please take a look for those. One easy way to find it is just Google search NIGMS IPERT program. It will take you right to our page, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see a little button that will have the webinar information. We will try to put that up as quickly as we can. If you have questions, please type your questions in the Q&A box instead of the chat box throughout the webinar, and we will get to them at the end of the webinar. We said if time permits, there'll be a Q&A, but we're hoping and going to do our best to make sure that you have a time and an opportunity to ask us questions at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please. So our disclaimer, this webinar and accompanying slides are for informational purposes only. They serve as an overview and are not meant to be comprehensive in coverage of all the required components of an application. For any submission, applicants are responsible for the following instructions detailed in the SF 424 guide, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which we call the NOFO, and any related notices. Next slide, please. So one thing that we want to highlight before we start this webinar is that we will have a notice of clarification of instructions for the resource sharing plan that will be associated with this NOFO. So the updated changes are in bold red font at the bottom. So for the resource sharing plan, what you will please make sure to look at this notice at, like I said, at the top of the NOFO, and it's a resource sharing plan may not be necessary for all applications to this NOFO. Applicants should not duplicate information included in the dissemination plan. So just to clarify, this information is not in the main body and text of the NOFO, but it will be in a notice associated with the NOFO. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. It's not a huge change, but we just wanted to make sure that people were not confused when they were applying to the program. Next slide, please. So some key program dates. So again, here's the new NOFO PAR number, and the application due dates are October 17th, 2024, October 15th, 2025, and October 14th, 2026. So October 17th is coming up soon. So again, please reach out to us if you have questions about your application. Since the due date it feels like around the corner. The application review will happen in March. So for this current cycle, March 2025, the advisory council will be in May 2025, and the earliest start date for your program, if it is awarded, would be July 2025. Next slide, please. So the outline for our talk today, first we're going to go over briefly some IPERT program objectives, key program considerations, highlights of the application components, key changes to the current NOFO, budget overview, peer review, and then the Q&A. Next slide, please. So the IPERT program objectives. So the main objective is to fund innovative educational activities to equip participants with technical, operational, or professional skills required for careers in the biomedical research workforce. These activities must be open to the broader biomedical research community and may focus on participants at one or more career stages from undergraduates to professionals. For example, faculty, staff scientists, postdocs, etc. IPERT applications must have a focus on one or more of the following activities. The first one is courses for skills development. The second is curriculum or methods development. And the third is mentoring activities. So again, the focus can be on one or more of these following activities. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to briefly talk about these activities in a little more detail here. So the first one that your program can focus on is courses for skills development. So these can be in-person or virtual courses designed to develop the skills necessary for the biomedical research workforce careers. For example, again, these are four examples, courses where participants develop technical skills that are appropriate and safe research methods, new technologies, quantitative computational approaches or pedagogy. Operational skills could be independent knowledge acquisition, rigorous experimental design, data interpretation, or it could be professional skills. So management, leadership, communication, teamwork, collaboration, mentoring, career navigation, outreach advocacy, inclusivity. Sorry, next slide, please. The IPERT program objectives also could be on curriculum or methods development. So for example, activities where participants develop or enhance curriculum, methods, novel instructional approaches, or computer-based tools that are intended to improve biomedical research education at numerous organizations. Next slide, please. Or your program can focus on mentoring activities. So for example, activities where participants are trained as mentors or where participants receive advice, insight, and professional career skills, training appropriate to their career stage as part of a mentoring network or similar formal mentoring structure. So typical informal mentoring activities associated with research experience programs and courses for skills development are assumed to be an integral part of those programs' courses and therefore do not typically merit the selection of mentoring as a separate activity. Next slide, please. The types of applications that are allowed for the IPERT program. So this is very important. That's why there's only 2 bullet points. We really wanted to make this point clear. So only new applications are allowed to the IPERT program. Resubmissions and renewal applications are not allowed. Please do not submit, even if it is your second go at the IPERT opportunity, please submit it as a new application, not a resubmission, and then renewals will not also be allowed this round, or sorry, for this NOFO. Next slide, please. So active or previous IPERT awardees, these are just a few special notes. Just we want to make sure that you know these updates and don't miss this important section. So the new NOFO requirement is a section called results from related NIGMS support. So relevant for applications with senior key personnel who have related current or previous NIGMS IPERT or R13 support. So you must include information about the supported program, justify the need for additional funding, describe how the proposed program significantly differs from or expands upon the previously funded program, and then you can see section 4 of the NOFO for the full list of information requested. And as we have in red bold font, we just want to gently remind you that applications with related current or prior support that do not include this new section that's called a results from related NIGMS support will not be reviewed. So if you have a previous program or currently funding, you can apply to the NOFO. We're not saying that. We just need you to include this information to help reviewers assess whether the program is different enough and what is new that's being proposed, and then the previous outcomes. So just give them a better idea of what is going to be proposed and the chances for success of that in the next round. Next slide, please. So eligibility for active or previous IPERT awardees. So a PD or PI with an active IPERT award is eligible to submit a new IPERT application if the new IPERT project is distinct from the active award and no more than 6 months of overlap exists between the end date of the current IPERT award and the potential start date of the new IPERT award. An organization with previous or current IPERT R25 or NIGMS R13 awards is also eligible to submit new applications that are distinct from and do not overlap with those previous or current IPERT R25 or NIGMS R13 awards. So organizations with a contractual fee for service or consortium partnership with an active IPERT award may submit a new IPERT application if the proposed program is independent of the existing IPERT contractual fee for service or consortium partnership. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Sadella Blatch. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kalinda. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start with going over some key program considerations. And this is an important part of the NOFO, and you'll be reading about that when you read the NOFO. But what this section describes are some of the highlights of aspects that we intend to fund. So these are characteristics of programs that are the goal for the IPERT program to support. So the I stands for innovation. So this is a central feature. Of course, the proposed IPERT program should either apply novel concepts, methods, or technologies, or use existing concepts, method, or technologies in novel ways to achieve the goals of training the biomedical research workforce. An application that only proposes to continue previously implemented activities may be considered to lack innovation or not align with IPERT program goals. However, broadly expanding participation for an already developed program may be appropriate if it will meet a significant need in the biomedical research workforce. So as Kalinda just talked about with the new section in this reissued NOFO, applications proposing programs related to those previously supported by NIGMS through an R13 or the IPERT must strongly justify the need for the program and additional funding from NIGMS, and include new elements that significantly build on the initially awarded activities. I already see a question in the chat that relates directly to this. You would not be required to include that section Kalinda talked about. For T32s, it's required for R13s from NIGMS or prior IPERTs. However, if this relates to activities being conducted with your T32s, we would encourage you to include a description of whichever synergies may be taking place. Next slide, please. So some additional program considerations. We encourage applications for individuals in a variety of biomedical research fields. However, if you want to propose a program that focuses on one scientific area, we want you to know that we prioritize areas that fit in the NIGMS research mission, which you can find on our website. However, it doesn't mean you can't submit them, but this is our priority, of course, in alignment with our mission. IPERT activities must be open to the broader biomedical community, and by that we mean not restricted to participants from a single organization. So you should not be proposing to have your participants only come from one organization. We prioritize programs that are open to participants nationwide. That is our priority for IPERT. However, if you would like to propose what we're calling a regional participant pool, which is anything other than nationwide, you must strongly justify this. And that could be in an instance where there is a specific regional need in an area, or if nationwide participation is not practical. As Kalinda touched upon, IPERT activities may focus on individuals at one or more career stages, from undergraduate through professional, so not K through 12. Next slide, please. So we have in this reissued NOFO non-responsiveness criteria. That means applications with these characteristics will be considered non-responsive, they will be withdrawn, they will not be reviewed. So the core of the program, as Kalinda talked about, are the 3 areas, and each applicant should have at least one, but could have 2 or 3 of the courses for skills development, curriculum or methods development, or mentoring activities. Again, if you have senior or key personnel on the application that have had or do have IPERT or R13 support from NIGMS, you have to have that section that Kalinda explained, or the application will be withdrawn. This is described in the NOFO. Applications that plan to enroll participants only from one organization will be withdrawn. And applications that propose project-based mentored research experiences as an integral part of the program would be withdrawn and are not appropriate. That is described in the NOFO. Some of you may be familiar with other R25 NOFOs from NIH that may consist entirely or largely of research experiences, typically a mentored research experience. That is not the focus of this R25 IPERT program. Next slide, please. I'm going to do some of the highlights of application components. Again, as Kalinda said, this is not by no means an exhaustive. We're just pointing out a few elements. I'll do some of these and then Joyce will follow. Next slide, please. So it's extremely important to read the SF 424, the NOFO and notices, because that is where your full instructions are going to be found. Anytime the NOFO differs from the SF 424 application guide, the NOFO would be what you follow, unless there's a notice that differs from the NOFO. So Kalinda showed you an example, the resource sharing plan clarification notice that was recently published. Add some information to the NOFO to help you clarify that. And the notices that are associated are in the first section of any NOFO. Next slide, please. So first, there is an additional and other attachment that was not in the prior NOFO, and this is, you may see this coming in other NIH NOFOs, and this is a document called a Plan for Enhancing Diverse Perspectives. All IPERT applications must have this plan. It is required. And this will be a summary of actionable items to advance scientific and technical merit of the proposed project through expanded inclusivity. The alignment of proposed PEDAP strategies with the research strategy section. So in your case, your proposed IPERT program and the associated information that can provide a holistic and integrative view of how enhancing diverse perspectives and inclusivity are buoyed throughout your application. How this will advance scientific technical merit of the proposed project, and including a timeline of the proposed PEDP or PEDAP activities and evaluation methods for these activities. So this is an attachment that goes in the other attachment section that's required. And then you may have two others. These are optional. One is research education activities. If you do include this, this would be only up to 10 pages at the most. In prior NOFOs, some of this content was allowed in the appendix, but do not put this in the appendix. If you want to include this, it only can be as an other attachment. Also, if you have an advisory committee for your program, you can have up to 1 page of information about that, also as an other attachment. So please do not put anything else in the other attachment section, even as this may differ in this NOFO from the prior NOFO, because this is a change and you must adhere to these instructions. Next slide, please. So another section is the PHS 398 research plan, research strategy document. We are asking you to use headings and subheadings that you'll see in our NOFO to organize your research strategy section. The first one is the proposed IPERT program. I'm going to go over that, and the subheadings we would like you to use for that, and Joyce will talk about the rest. Next slide, please. So the proposed IPERT program, which is within the research strategy, I'm only going to mention a few very brief highlights. Of course, you're going to read about this in the NOFO, so I'm just pointing out a couple of specific pieces here. Please include a rationale section in this, where you're going to describe the gap in biomedical research training that your proposed IPERT intends to address. You should include literature to support this, and if you have any baseline data to justify this, that would be helpful to include as well. You will have your objectives here, and part of that would be to explain why the program objectives are relevant at either the regional or national level, and why this cannot be met through existing programs. As I mentioned before, some of you may have a scientific focus. If that's the case, please describe how this aligns with the NIGMS and/or NIH mission. If you are recruiting only from one discipline, which remember is not necessarily our priority, please describe the relevance to the broader biomedical research workforce, how this relates on a broader scale. Please use another subheading of innovation and results from related NIGMS support if applicable, but we've already talked about those. Next slide, please. Another heading we'd like you to use is the one called program activities. This is going to be where you're describing those 1, 2, or 3 areas that Kalinda detailed: the planning, the implementation, the accessibility of your proposed activities. We detail this in the NOFO, so I refer you to that. And for some of your projects, it might be relevant to talk about how your participants will learn methods for enhancing reproducibility and or responsible conduct of research. So if applicable, then you would include that information here in this section. We also ask for a subheading called ongoing engagement with program participants. This will help ensure that the program activities have the effects you desire, that the participants have support and continued engagement after they complete the activities that you're offering. Just a couple of examples, this could be peer or group mentoring or some sorts of follow-up activities. And we also ask you to address a learning environment and also a timeline. Next slide, please. And I will hand this over to my colleague, Joyce.
Hi, so here I'm going to talk about the final components of the research program plan. So you have a section called the program leadership structure, and here is where you provide evidence that the PDPIs have the appropriate expertise and ability to run the program. So you can see that the PDPIs may include people like biomedical researchers, subject matter experts, program administrators, educators, evaluators, etc. The main thing is you need to describe how these people together will be able to run the IPERT program appropriately. Depending on your program, you may want to include additional individuals to help run the program. These people may be subject matter or technical experts, program facilitators, instructors for your courses, mentors for your mentoring network, etc. And so you should describe the desired qualifications for these people and how you will recruit them. Importantly, these people may or may not be senior/key personnel. You should include bio sketches, and that's in a separate, as a separate attachment in the appropriate section of the application. You should include bio sketches for all senior or key personnel. So these would be the PDPIs and any other individuals that you designate as senior key personnel. In these bio sketches, the personal statement should describe the relevant educational program experience and the commitment to educational training for these personnel. Next slide, please. There is a section to describe the program participants. Here you will describe how program participants will be recruited and selected for your program. As Sadella mentioned already, we prioritize programs that have nationwide participants. And if your program is not planning to recruit nationwide, this needs to be well justified. So here you're going to state the educational or career levels of the plan participants, how many participants you expect, how this program is broken up, how many participants you expect in each segment of the program. When relevant, you should describe participant eligibility or selection criteria. All selection processes must be consistent with applicable law, and NIH does not, and you should not, use race, ethnicity, or sex as a selection criteria. If applicable, provide a plan for provide a recruitment plan to enhance diversity. And so this is a plan that would include strategies and activities designed to recruit potential participants from diverse backgrounds. And we have a link here to the NIGMS webpage for strategies to enhance diversity in training programs that could be relevant for you. Next slide, please. The IPERT application also requires both evaluation and dissemination plans. Please look at the NOFO for more details on what should be included in the evaluation and dissemination plans. But just briefly here, IPERT programs must conduct ongoing evaluations to monitor the success of the activities for both formative and summative evaluative purposes. So formative evaluation so that you can adapt and adjust and improve your program as you go along. Summative evaluation so that at the end you can describe whether you have met your goals. And evaluation resources are available on our webpage. On the dissemination plan side, please provide a plan to disseminate any findings resulting from your program and any materials developed by your program. Generally, we expect that this dissemination might include publications, conference presentations, website dissemination, things like that. You should also, in the dissemination plan, describe additional plans to continue your IPERT activities and the tracking of outcomes beyond this award, because, as we said earlier, renewal applications are not accepted. Next slide, please. The next section is the letters of support section. We require a letter from your organization, that is the organizational support letter, and in this letter, you should describe the availability of staff, facilities, activities, and educational resources that can contribute to the planned IPERT program, its evaluation, and its dissemination. The program personnel should have sufficient organizational support to create a sound educational environment for the program participants. This letter is required. Applications lacking this letter will not be reviewed. You may want to include additional letters of support. For example, if you have partner organizations, you might want to include letters from these partners. These letters should not contain any information that is required in the organizational support letter. If you have multiple letters, please combine all letters of support into a single PDF file to be uploaded in the appropriate section of the application. Next slide, please. Kalinda already talked about the resource sharing plan, so this is just in here for completeness. If a resource sharing plan is applicable, please comply with the instructions as provided in the SF424 application guide. And remember that a resource sharing plan may not be necessary for all applications to this NOFO. Next slide, please. Finally, the appendix. If you have read the previous NOFO, it had NOFO-specific appendices. They have all been eliminated. Therefore, applications may only contain appendices that are allowed according to the SF424 application guide. These are very limited. There's a very limited set of appendices. Don't include any others, because if you do, your application may be withdrawn without review. And here's a reminder. If you have syllabi and outlines of required training activities, these may be included in the optional research education activities, other attachment that Sadella talked about earlier. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have summarized all the key changes to the current NOFO in the next slide. Next slide, please. So here they are. I'm not going to go through them again, but this is for your reference. I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but I'll mention it again, that the PDF of these slides will be made available on the website shortly after this presentation. And so you can refer to this PDF, click on the links as necessary, and look at the summary slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is some information for you if you are thinking of applying. Please read the NOFO, including the related notices, in the overview section. We have tried to give kind of a brief overview of what is required in this NOFO, but there's a lot more detail that is in that document, so please read it. Refer to the IPERT website, which, as I said earlier, also contains the webinar materials. And then finally, if you are interested in some preliminary non-binding feedback on your proposed program's fit to the IPERT program, please send a single email to the three of us, Sadella, Linda, and I. In that email, include a one-page summary with a brief rationale for your program and your program objectives, If applicable, a brief explanation of how your program differs from current or previous NIGMS IPERT or R13 support, a summary of the activities that you're proposing for the areas of focus of your program, and the characteristics of your proposed participant pool. Send us that email and one of us will get back to you with feedback, or we could meet with you to talk about it as well. Next slide, please. Yes, I am done. And so now I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Jennifer, who is going to talk about the budget.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer. I'll be reviewing the requirements for the IPERT budget section of the application. Please bear with me if my voice is a little off. I am returned from vacation with a bad head cold. But next slide. Budget overview. The budget is limited to no more than $500,000 per year in direct costs, and it's a maximum project period of 5 years. The indirect cost rate, F&A costs, are limited to 8%. That'll be calculated by the total direct costs, with the only exclusion being equipment and tuition and fees. The application requires the use of the detailed R&R budget format. Next slide. The budget form requires detailed itemized listing of all the requested costs. Each category will need to be justified in the budget justification section. With the budget justification, it's particularly important to provide an explanation for any out-year variations. If materials and supplies are required not until year 3, you'd provide an explanation in the budget justification. Detailed line-by-line instructions for completing the R&R form can be found in section G300 of the SF 424 instruction set. There's a link right there in these slides. Next page, please. The budget form requires detailed listing of all requested costs. Section B there will include all non-key personnel project staff. The participant support cost sections includes all NOFO allowable categories for direct support of the participants. PDP implementation costs are allowable on this NOFO. These costs may be requested in the other program cost category. Next slide, please. This is the first page of the budget form. You'd initiate it with clicking the checkbox for budget type and enter the start and end dates, which should comprise a 12-month period. Section A is where you enter the salary information, requested support level for the PIs and PDs. Requested salary should be based on institutional base salary at the time the application is submitted. Section B, other personnel, includes salary information for all other staff working on the project. Next page, please. Participant costs are allowable, and the specific costs which may be included in this section are detailed in the NOFO. Participants may be compensated for activities specifically required by the program. The cost must be itemized in the budget and the budget justification. Funds may be requested for the travel of participants to the IPERT activities. Per diem costs, that's meals and lodging for activity participants, may be requested and will be limited to the days of attendance at the planned activity. Okay, this is an R25 program, so scholars, fellows, and trainees, trainees supported on NRSA grants, they may receive educational experiences as part of this program, but they may not receive any compensation or any stipend supplementation from the research education grant. Next page, please. The final category in the budget for direct costs is other program-related expenses. In this section, you'll itemize the requested consultant, equipment, supplies, and KP travel expenses and other program-related expenses. Similar to the other categories, the expenses should be itemized in the budget, and a budget justification for the cost should be provided in the budget justification. Okay, next page. Oh, back page. Just one final reminder, as you draft the budget, just refer to the NOFO frequently. It outlines all the allowable costs for this particular project, and specific cost category information can also be found in the R&R budget instructions. And that is the end of the budget slides. I'll hand this over to Latarsha for peer review.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Next slide, please. So IPERT applications will be reviewed by an NIGMS review panel, and we will assemble that panel once we receive the applications. The scientific review officer assigned to the IPERT meeting will email applicants informing them about the meeting dates, instructions for providing post-submission updates, a link to the committee roster, and who are the appropriate contacts during the review and after the review process. As applicants, you all can assess your scores and summary statements through your ERA Commons account. Next slide, please. So the review process timeline, generally, it takes about 1 to 2 months for the referral process for your applications to be referred to NIGMS. This is from the time of submission. It takes about 2 to 6 months for the review panel to be assembled and for the review meeting to actually take place. 6 to 7 months for you all to receive your summary statement feedback. 7 to 8 months for the advisory council to meet. 8 to 9 months for funding decisions to be made, and then 9 to 10 months for the award to start. During the review process, the SRO, the scientific review officer, is the appropriate contact. And then after the review, after you received your summary statements, your program officer is the appropriate contact. Okay, for the review of applications, section 5 is where you can find the review considerations for this NOFO. It's very important that you take a look there to see exactly what your application will be, what criteria will be used to assess your evaluation. Oftentimes as the applicant, you all refer to section 4, which gives you information about the application and submission information, but it's critically important to also pay attention to section 5. So you can make sure that all of the required information is present for which the reviewers will need to assess your application. Next slide, please. So there are 5 scored review criteria. Those are significance, investigator, innovation, approach, and environment. For each of these, there are general R25 review criteria that are listed in the NOFO, but there are also more specifically tailored review criteria that are called out as specific to this NOFO. So again, please be sure to take a look in that section. Next slide, please. And then there's another section called the additional review criteria. These sections, they do not get separate scores like the previous slide, the 5 scored review criteria. These ones do not get separate scores, but they do contribute to the overall impact score. And those are protections for human subjects, inclusion of women, minorities, and individuals across the lifespan, vertebrate animals, biohazards, and training and methods for enhancing reproducibility. Next slide, please. And then the final category is additional review considerations. These do not receive individual scores and they do not factor into the overall impact score. But if there are any issues, they will need to be resolved prior to funding. And those are the recruitment plan to enhance diversity, training in the responsible conduct of research, resource sharing plan, which primarily has to do with model organisms for this NOFO, and then budget and period of support. Next slide, please. Okay, so advice for applying. We always encourage applicants to submit as early as possible. If you submit at least 2 days before the deadline, that allows you to go into the system, review your application to see if there are any missing items, any inaccuracies that you can go in and correct. So again, please go in and review your application and check it for completeness. Let's see. So there is a system that will catch some errors, like if you're over page limits and things like that, but that system does not catch everything. So there are manual checks that also happen. So just because you don't receive an error at the time of submission, that does not mean that your application is complete and compliant. So again, please be sure to be as thorough as possible when reviewing your application. So applications that are missing anything, or if you have any unallowed material in your application, it could be withdrawn. Next slide, please. Okay, so please just be as clear as possible in your application. Please don't expect reviewers to read in between the lines or figure out what you're proposing. Include clear, measurable, and attainable goals. And something that reviewers do pay attention to, and I heard the program officers talking about it earlier, are, you address plans for sustainability, dissemination, and evaluation. Those are not just afterthoughts, they are things that are important for review. Next slide, please. Okay, so now it's open for questions, and here are all of the contacts. You can see the program officers listed here. There's my contact for review and also grants management contact as well. Next slide. Okay, I'll hand it over to our program officers, but thank you all and good luck on your application.
Thank you, Latarsha and Jennifer. I'm sorry you're not feeling well. And for all the colleagues. So we're going to open it up to the Q&A now. We see that in the chat, there was a lot of good questions. So if people have a moment to peruse some of those, I think these are really general types of questions that we typically get from our email inquiries. So let's see, does anybody have a question right now? I did see Beth's question about human subjects. Does this refer to the participants themselves or only if they were working with human subject data? So this is a little bit of a tricky question that we often try to delineate for each IPERT program individually. Honestly, my answer would be, if you have an idea of what you're going to propose and whether or not you're unsure if it is human subjects research, please email one of the program officers or all three of us, and we can take a look at it and talk to some of our human subjects experts at our institute. We have a whole group of folks that review these and let us know, yeah, this should be coded as human subjects or not. And that way, it's kind of nice to approach that before you submit your application. And then if it gets awarded, it could prolong the funds or the notice of award being released. So we are talking about participants, but again, this can vary among programs and what is actually being proposed and the types of evaluations that will be carried out. So please feel free though to contact us and we can discuss it before you submit your application, if that's helpful. Thanks.
Can I add to that? I put in the chat, I think the first thing to do is look at how NIH defines human subjects research, and I put the link in the chat. I made a typo. I wrote e-cision tool, but there's a decision tool there on the website, and it defines what NIH counts as human subjects research, and you can use the decision tool. So that should be a helpful place to help you figure that out.
Thank you, Sadella. Sorry, I think I turned off my VPN, but my sound's coming in and out. Let's see. I'm just going through the questions to see. So training and methods for enhancing reproducibility was listed as additional review criteria, but it seemed to be optional in the NOFO to include that sort of training. Could you discuss? I think so. Sorry to call you out, Sadella. Sadella has a lot of experience with educational programs, and she kind of taught me a little bit more about this. I don't know if you would be available to elaborate a little bit more on why this is not appropriate for every program.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, not all applications may need to include the methods for enhancing reproducibility or responsible conduct for research. It's just going to depend on the type of research education you're proposing. I'll just make up a very broad example. If you had an IPERT that was all about sort of leadership, perhaps, and training faculty to become academic administrator leaders, department chairs, or something like that, or what have you, then that you may not be needing to work with them on responsible conduct for research or methods for enhancing reproducibility. Perhaps that wouldn't be the focus of the type of leadership training that you might be providing. So it may not apply to all applications. But as for review, I'll pass that part to Latarsha. Perhaps you could address the aspect of it is an option, an additional review criteria.
So training and methods for enhancing reproducibility is listed as additional review criteria. So it does factor into the overall impact score. But there is something in the review criteria that says specific to this NOFO, if applicable, assess the instruction and methods for enhancing reproducibility. So it will only be assessed if it's applicable.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sorry, Sedella, to put you on the spot. I know that you could come up with a good example in the moment. So we hope that helps answer the question. So I see a question from Rebecca Todd, but I'm not entirely, so it's a good question. So let me read it. And then maybe if you don't mind just coming off of mute or elaborating in the chat. So it says, can national participation be provided for some aspects of a proposed program, but restricted in some areas? For example, some of our project partners may face restrictions with serving individuals outside of our state. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what these restrictions could possibly be. I'm sorry if I'm not aware of these. But we want to, oh, sorry, are you there?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Hi. So we are very early in the planning or brainstorming stages, but we have a couple of partners in the state, but they could maybe provide some consulting services or other subject matter expertise, but their mandate did really to stay within our state with their services. So I didn't know if that would still be an aspect of the program that we could keep, or do we need to really be prepared for everything that we offer to be able to be provided to anyone in the nation that wants to be a part of this program?
Right, that's an interesting question. I'm not 100% sure of the answer. I don't know if any of my colleagues are. I think that, I mean, for me, it seems like as long as it's well justified about what these, aspects of the project are and why there is a restriction, and then, how you're going to address that restriction and also make sure the program has a broad reach. We do have a statement in the NOFO about regional, if it was a regional focus and how that can happen, but there really needs to be a strong justification for it. Again, this is something that we can take a look at beforehand. I mean, of course, we can't give too much feedback on the program itself, but we can tell you maybe about the reach, whether it seems appropriate. But because I had not heard about that, or maybe you can email us about what some of these restrictions might be, so we have a better idea of what it is and whether or not it's a fit. It could be a fit for the program. Does anybody have anything to add to that? I feel like I maybe didn't answer that fully, Rebecca. Sorry about that.
No, that's helpful that we can maybe get feedback once we have it more fleshed out and can be more specific.
Okay. Yeah, it's good for us to know too what different institutions or organizations are facing. Mike, I saw you come off mute. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm confused by the question. Are you talking about partners that are offering the program, or are you talking about participants? Because the requirement that participants be from everywhere, basically, is different than the partners that you use to structure the program. So I think that's probably what you need to clarify for us.
Yeah, I was talking about partners, like if we work with other entrepreneur support organizations or groups like that, that typically need to stay within the state with what they do. If they could maybe provide introductory information, but maybe couldn't provide follow-on services for all participants outside of our state, for example.
Well, I think it's important that your partners, whoever they are, whichever organizations they are, be able to provide what they're providing to the program to all of the participants.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just add, because I think, Rebecca, we've corresponded a little bit by email. So perhaps you can provide one page with a little bit more specifics about that, and we can follow up by email.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Adela and Mike. So the next question is, and this is not a stupid question, Sarah, but she says, what is the difference between IPERT and a T32? So I do not have T32s in my portfolio. I do have T34s, and I'm just going to give the basic explanation. I think we do have some T32 POs here, but the main difference is one is a research training program for trainees specifically to have. So the T32 is for grad students, and so it has research experiences. It's for the individual. To do their research and then move on successfully, right? So this is not that type of training program. There's no research experiences per se for like in a lab with a PI. We're going to pay their stipend, we're going to pay their salary and whatnot for them to go to conferences. This is different. This is a different type of research program. This is to enhance research training, but not necessarily like the typical training you think like. So I'm a T34 PO. So that's for undergrads to move into graduate school. So we provide summer research experience support, salary support, conference support, things like that. And so that is a very different type of program. Does anybody else want to elaborate if I wasn't clear? Isadella, thanks.
Yeah, I'll just add on a little bit. One of the other major differences besides what Kalinda said is that in a T32, all of those trainees are enrolled in a degree at the same one single institution. So in that case, probably a PhD, or maybe if they're not enrolled in a degree, they might be in a postdoctoral T32, but those tend to be at just one institution, and it offsets their tuition. They get a stipend, which remember in the R25, as Jennifer said, that these participants do not get a stipend. They don't get support for tuition, and that there is not a degree or training that is common to the institution.
Thank you. So we hope that helps. The next question I see is, oops, let me see. The chat's moving fast. My questions are fluctuating. Can the national implementation be phased after pilot intervention and assessment on a smaller scale? So my preliminary answer is yes, but again, it just needs to be well described in your application about how this is going to happen, and it needs to be feasible, right? Like reviewers are going to want to see that this could actually be expanded after you've collected maybe like pilot data. Some programs collect pilot data before. Again, it's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just letting you know that's what happens sometimes if the funds are available, right? We know it can depend on that. So I think, again, as long as everything is well explained to the reviewers so they understand what you're actually going to do and how that can successfully be carried out later on at a national scale. Because sometimes it's really hard, I'm sure, as everybody here knows, to move from this small scale to a national scale. And again, we do have in the NOFO a description about how it can be regional, but there needs to be a strong justification. Like if there's a certain demographic I said demographic, I probably should have said demographic, a certain community that you want to focus on, whether it's, I don't know, every region has kind of its own unique difference. And so if you do have a group that you would like to focus on, you can provide a strong rationale for why it will be regional, let's say within 5 states or whatever. You can provide that. Again, if you have questions, you can reach out to us with a short specific aims page or just summary of your program, and we can let you know if we think it fits the program. Let's see. So a single application can be good as long as the participants are from all over. Is it okay if we don't have a scientific focus? And this is from Professor Eros. Yeah, I guess I would, that's a really broad question, so I would have to know a little bit more about what you're asking. I think I know what you're asking, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if you're on right now and want to unmute.
Yeah, I'm on. I mean, obviously be biomedical, but if you're thinking of a broad array of topics, like let's say robotics and on one side, and to be as varied as much as like generative biology, right? So they don't kind of fall into, I mean, they could fall into like a focus like the heart if possible, but they don't necessarily fall into a category, or we're not able to identify or refine the category yet because we're still talking to industry partners. So I was kind of wondering if it could just be broadly open in the biomedical space.
Right. So, the quick answer is, and I think you had emailed us previously, so we can talk more about it there too.
Yes.
I think you gave us a bunch of good examples to think about, because this is a little bit of a complicated one, I will say. But I mean, in general, it does need, we do, so we have priority, and I think Sadella had mentioned this in her slides, that there is priority if they fit within the NIGMS mission, and we do have a link for that in the NOFO. However, it can expand a little bit outside of that, but again, preference is for those that fall within the NIGMS mission. So that's the short, quick answer, but yours is a little bit more complicated. So I think if we continue the conversation in our emails and offline, or unless Joyce, I just saw you come on.
Actually, I was kind of, I wanted to answer that question more broadly so that it's probably actually not relevant to what the question you were asking, but kind of very much more broadly. No, you don't necessarily need a scientific focus. So for example, if you were proposing a program about scientific communication, that does not necessarily have a specific scientific focus. So that is absolutely okay, but it really depends on the specific program that you are thinking about, as Kalinda just said. I don't know if I just, came up with something that was completely out of the blue, but I mean, if I just take that one line question, is it okay to not have a scientific focus? The answer is yes, it could be, depending on what it is that you are proposing.
Gotcha. But if you're mentioning things that do have a scientific focus, it's better to focus on what is in the NIGMS statement, so to speak.
Yes. Yes, I would say so, yes. If you did have a scientific focus, then the priority is something within the NIGMS mission. Yes.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay, so
Thank you.
sure, thank you for the question. So Beth wanted to clarify, the NOFO says participants can be compensated. How does that fit with R25's not supporting trainees? Can we not use it on participant salaries as long as they are less than 50% time and not also on KTF awards? Okay, so these are very, very different programs, right? The T32, the T34, those are training programs. This is a program to support research training. So participants can be students, they can be faculty, right? We're not going to call faculty trainees. They can be postdocs, they can be, Sadella mentioned earlier, like maybe administrative staff, VPs of research, provost, I don't know, but everybody gets a little bit creative with this. So those are not trainees. This is not to support their trainee, their training in the research lab. And I know as I'm saying that now, maybe it sounds a little bit confusing, but let me see, where did the question go? Sorry, here it is. Okay. So can we not use it on participant salaries as long as, so participants don't typically, from what we see, and we do have Jennifer here, don't usually receive salaries. We usually see like gift cards, things like that. But I think this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse. So I don't know, Jennifer, are you available? I know you're not feeling well, to maybe clarify about the costs.
So participants can be provided salary, but it would be for a specific time on an activity that is program required by the program. It's usually, it's nothing like a T32 where they are fully supported to complete their research.
Okay.
And obviously with all that, you need to justify it and make it really clear why you're requesting support compensation for participants.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, did you want to add some of your insight of working on the IPERT since its inception?
No, I think Jennifer got that definition right. Look, you can compensate occasionally. You can provide per diem for individuals that participate in the activities if that is necessary in terms of recruiting people who have to come some distance, or take time out of their other work to participate in the activities. So those are different ways of providing support for participants, but they can't, generally salaries are not something that we expect to see requested.
Thank you. I hope that helps, Beth. These are, honestly, these are very classic questions that we get in emails. So it's great that we're discussing him here because a lot of people have this question. Can tend to be a little bit confusing about what the difference is. Maybe we'll make a FAQ if we don't have one already about the differences.
I wanted to add that maybe it would help to think about the IPERT as an ancillary. I mean, I think Linda has said this multiple times. It's kind of an add-on program, an ancillary program. This is not meant to be like, this is the training program that the student is going to take to get a PhD. This might be, and a course that might enhance their training, or mentorship that might enhance their training. And in those cases, then it really would not be appropriate for the participant to be compensated at anywhere close to 50% time. I mean, it would be it's a short-term thing. It's not meant to be full-time for a year kind of thing. That's what the intent of the IPERT program is. They are ancillary types of training mechanisms, courses, things like that. I don't know if that helps to think about it that way.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm going to provide the in the chat the link for our dashboard of previously funded programs. Oh, that's a long link. Sorry, but sometimes applicants have told me that is helpful, is to see what has previously been funded, and it can kind of give you an idea. Again, you can send us something and we can see if there's a good fit for it. Even though it will need to give us a little bit of time to answer all the emails because we do get a lot of inquiries, but it can be a little confusing. And so we will have an FAQs page as well. We're working on updating that right now. We'll provide, just to reiterate, all the slides and the recording on our webpage. So you all have access to that as well if you need to review anything again, or sometimes it's a little bit easier to read in a PDF format than in the long NOFO, but please read the NOFO. I'm not saying not to. There's a lot of information that we did not include in the presentation that's in the PDF, but this link might help give you a couple ideas. You might even know some of these PIs, and you could ask them. I know it's a small world about what they're doing and if it fits. Again, this NOFO is a little different. So but basically some of these questions, especially about why is this a training program or not, like a typical NRSA training program. Let's see. Somebody was asking if we could address Joe Grayler's question about PI eligibility, because that might have got skipped over. Let me try to find it. Okay, so sorry about that. Sorry, Joe. Can you please confirm PI eligibility requirements? We currently have an IPERT award, which doesn't end until 7/31/2026. Since a new award would overlap by more than 6 months, would this PI be ineligible for a new IPERT? I think yes, but does anybody want to elaborate? Sedella?
Yeah, I think maybe the best suggestion would be to wait, not this due date, but the due date in 2025. I think because if your group applied now, it would be or in October, it would be for fiscal year 2025 funding. So it may be too close with the 6-month overlap. So you might want to look at the subsequent due date.
Sedella. Let me see. Hope that helps, Andy. Andy also asked, is the 6-month overlap with the due date or the start date? I do not remember. That is a good question, and I am trying to remember what it says. Sorry, I'm just looking through my notes here in the slides.
It's the start date.
It's a start date. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyone who's in that situation, I think it was on Kalinda's slide that
Yeah.
shows the front part of the top part of the NOFO with the key dates. And that's sort of the map, so to speak, that you could use because each year, because the due date is roughly the same every year, mid-October every year, you can like walk through that and see the potential start date. Now, that is an early date. That is probably not going to be anyone's actual start date. So it's might be a few months later than that, maybe a couple of months or so. So I would use for anyone in that situation, look at the key dates to see match the application submission due date with a potential early start date. Hopefully that is clear.
So Andy Sedella asked as you were right, like in the middle of talking, so I didn't want to interrupt, and you might have answered it, but so can we propose a start date that gives us that 6-month window, or should we use the earliest possible start date?
So I would use the earliest possible start date, or it could be a little later, but we don't have sort of infinite ability to move a start date late, but there is some wiggle room. So I would look at that. And if you are unsure sort of how far outside of that you might fall, just shoot us an email and we can help you with that. Because it is not, it's not extremely precise, but we do have some boundaries there.
Thanks, Sedella. Andy said thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, I see that. So the next question is, I see that Richard is citing an application that we have funded, focuses on women researchers only. Is this allowed now? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by now. Like, is that allowed for the next round, or is Richard, would you mind unmuting maybe, or?
Oh, yes,
Thank you.
thanks. You said participants were could not be limited by racial group, sex, and other or ethnicity. And so I was wondering, versus something which I guess would need a non-women control group, whether in fact it is feasible to have the primary focus on women researchers.
Mike, are you or Allison available to maybe elaborate on the eligibility of this? Sorry to call you out.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's a good question. We're in challenging times, or changing times, I guess I should say. How about we just take all of this case by case, and if you have a program in mind, we can look it over. We can also talk with our Office of General Counsel. Probably a lot depends on how it's phrased. As you know, certainly recruitment can be targeted. That is definitely true. When we're talking about admissions to a program, that's the case in which you can't use race, ethnicity, or sex as an indicator. But having programs that focus on particular groups, we'll just have to take it case by case. If it's not a particular entryway into a program in which people get individualized or specialized educational material, it might be different. So it's not a very satisfying answer, but we are somewhat in the scenario of taking things to our general counsel. So if you could send us an email with your specific program in mind, we'll get back to you.
Kind of a work in progress as we
go. It's
And
challenging for sure.
Yeah, these IPERTs are unique too. It's not, again, like a NRSA training program. So it's a lot easier, more straightforward with those programs because we know exactly what they're proposing, but we don't know exactly what you're proposing yet. So like Allison said, that's good to know, Allison, if people send us stuff that we're not sure if there's something like maybe focused on the
Yeah.
education of women, that we can send it along and see.
Yeah, I mean, I think one way to think about it is if you have the goals of your programs are very specific, and then but then if you have the admissions open, you're very likely to have a sort of skewing of a certain group of people who are interested in this topic, but you might have some men who would participate, in which case, you know, that's also great because men knowing more about the topic is probably a good plan as well. So I think that if you're careful with your targeted recruitment for the pool, then things have a way of working out without you having to have exclusionary admissions or gateway. And I'll give the example of our Mosaic program that is very much a program to try to broaden participation among the faculty of in biomedical researchers in academia. And while that's the goal of the program, we can't exclude based on admissions, but 75% of the applicants are women and 75% are from individuals from underrepresented groups. So you can achieve your goals by stating what the purpose of the program is and doing targeted recruitment. And then at that point, when you let people into the program, you have to go by other criteria. So that's the way we're moving, or we've been doing this for a long time at NIH, and I think many other programs are having to do this now at an organizational level.
Thanks, Allison. Mike, did you have something?
Yeah, I think, I think you have to look carefully at the details of that program. The program is designed to help develop coaches who can coach women in the entrepreneurial areas of science, and they don't have to be women coaches. They could be coaches of of both genders. So I think you have to look closely at that program, see what they're about, see what they've done so far, and find out. But again, I think Allison's answer was giving you the same answer I would have given you, that we're kind of in a new environment here in terms of how we have to be careful. We have to make sure that our programs are entirely inclusive, not exclusive. So that's kind of the answer, the general answer. But I think in this particular case, you have to look closely at what that program is planning to do and the purpose and objectives of that program.
Thanks, Mike. Hope that was helpful. Richard, thank you for asking. These are all good questions. And like I said, these are typically questions we get, so it's great to answer them here and be able to provide a little bit of insight for everybody. Are there any other questions? Did I miss one? Oh, from a new one from Hayden Huggins. If a comparator control group is optional, how is impact measured reliably? Oops, I just lost my question. Oh, sorry, I got lost in the chat earlier. I think it depends on the program. Again, these IPERTs, I know what you're asking, and it's a good question. And again, maybe for the program that you're proposing, a control is like obvious, right? But there are some things that might not necessarily need that, or maybe it just depends on what is good for your program. And so it's your evaluation plan. We don't want to tell you necessarily how to construct it. We're just here to provide guidance about that. Sadella, did you want to add something?
Yeah, everything you said, Glenda, but I want to just sort of emphasize maybe a lens of this. So, many of you might be researchers and you're used to comparator or control groups in order to answer a research question, and that makes perfect sense. And you may be proposing activities through an IPERT for which you are also doing a research study on the effectiveness of the activities that you're proposing, which could be an intervention. So IPERT will not be funding the research. If you are needing a comparator group to do research, we have an R01 or R35s in general. The R01 is called Be Inspire. That is a whole mechanism just for research on interventions to enhance the biomedical research workforce. So as Kalinda said, for your IPERT, you're designing a solid and effective evaluation plan. A comparator group might be part of that, but if it's at the level of evaluation, many evaluation programs do not have a comparator group, although that is obviously more informative. So for the IPERT, the funding is not going to go to the research. So we would not expect to see a research level plan here. We're thinking about this as a comparator group, if possible, can be helpful in you evaluating the activities of your IPERT, right? If possible. So, but we are not saying that it needs to rise up to a level of research and you're needing a power analysis. We encourage that type of work, and then we'll encourage you to look at Be Inspire. B-Inspire if you want to do that level of work, but that wouldn't be funded through this R25.
Thank you, Sedella. That was very helpful for me too. We're all learning here together. And I put the link for the Be Inspire program in the chat in case anybody is interested. Again, that's an R01 or R35. And the program contacts will be listed at the bottom, and you can ask them if you have questions for that, or maybe you start with the IPERT and decide that, you know, you've developed something that could be an intervention, and then you can move on to that. I think we have seen that happen. I'm not sure, but in my head, it makes sense. So Carlos, okay, can you speak a little bit about the differences between emphasis on assessment of participants, IPERT products, and programmatic evaluation? I see Sedella, our evaluation guru.
It may
Take it
sort of
away.
follow a little bit from what I was just saying. So and then Kalinda, you can certainly add to whatever I've said. So I mean, I think maybe the first way to think about this is you know, you're overall evaluating your IPERT activities. You have a goal of meeting some need to improve the biomedical research workforce. So overall, we're asking you evaluate your IPERT in that context of the goal. And some programs do part or a lot of that evaluation by maybe something, for instance, surveying the participants, having them report on the activities, you know, what they found helpful or not, etc. That could be what some people include, for example, in some of their evaluations. So I think maybe something else, I'm not sure if you're also talking about the products and disseminating the products. So products, for example, could be, you know, curriculum. It could be curriculum that lays out workshops. It could be tools that are used. It could be training materials. There can be many IPERTs have products as a result that we ask you to describe how you'll disseminate some of your products. And that is, we want applications to address dissemination, but that isn't necessarily the same thing as evaluating your IPERT overall, the outcomes of your project overall. But we do ask for that in you addressing both of these in your application. But please, if you can unmute, if I'm like way off base from what you're asking, I might have misunderstood the question, Carlos. Please let us know.
In the chat, he said it was very helpful. Thank you. So yeah, it was definitely helpful, Sedella. And I also, to support all the things you were saying, I just put a couple copy and paste from the NOFO with the language in there. Hopefully that's helpful. Thank you so much for that clarification. Again, more great questions. I'm sure it will help everybody here on the call and who listens to the webinar later. We are at 4:20, so almost time. Does anybody have a last question? Or and again, please, feel free to reach out to me, Sadella, Joyce. If it's not a program question and it's more of a grants management question, a review question, we work very closely with our colleagues that are here, and they know all the answers to the things that we do not know, usually about budget and review. And so we can always reach out to them. And you can please feel free, if you already have an IPERT, and you have some questions and you want to include your grants management specialist, we include them on all of our emails because it's a real team that works together. So please make sure to CC them. And if it's something that is kind of official, include your AOR, your authorized official from your grants office, so that we can just make sure everything's in line with also what your organization is requiring, or the needs of your organization. So let's see. Where can we access the recording? So, okay, so Sadella just put the link in to our NIGMS IPERT webpage. The FAQs, as I said earlier, are being worked on right now and developed. We just want to make sure to update them and that we haven't missed anything, so that you all have all the information you need and are well equipped to provide an application. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there will be like a button. One will say IPERT webinar, one will say slides. So there'll be a PDF of the slides, and one will be FAQs. And then there'll also be a button that says previously funded IPERTs. And so that way, again, you can kind of take a look to see what people have done. And as Richard brought up before, can we still do some of the things that were done before? It's always good just to ask us if you're unsure. We don't mind answering your questions. And then let's see. So Rebecca, how important is an emphasis on co-developing interdisciplinary teamwork and leadership skills? So let me see if I'm thinking about this right. So is that for the actual IPERT program itself? It's not the multi-PI leadership plan or anything, right? Okay. So again, this is like, we don't want to be prescriptive and tell you exactly what your program needs to look like. I mean, if it makes sense, do it, right? If you really think the participants are going to get the most from, developing or having that teamwork, and then also developing leadership skills, which is often, helpful. But again, it's all going to depend on what you're proposing, and we want to give you some, freedom to develop your program, because you're the experts and how you see this to be a good fit for what you're proposing. And you can submit us, like we said, and I think Joyce or somebody was saying they had already maybe had some discussions with you. But again, if it makes sense and you justify it strongly, again, you want the reviewers, you want their buy-in, right? You want them to see why this whole program is going to succeed and really have a positive impact on the biomedical research workforce. That's really what you need them to see. I think having somebody just like with a regular research grant, like a science focused, grant with specific aims, it's, have somebody from the outside read it and say, oh yeah, I think this could make a difference, because our reviewers will have experience with these types of programs, but maybe some of them have different levels of experience. And so you really want to try to show them, yeah, this is strongly justified and this is why it would be effective. Sadella?
Yeah, just really small to add to that, what you just said, Kalinda, that all applicants should be justifying what they're proposing to address a specific gap. And as I mentioned in the rationale section, which is a subsection of the proposed IPERT program, which is a large part of your research strategy, that's where you would place that. And that's where you should be using literature to support your rationale. And if you have any baseline data, that would be helpful to include there. So as Kalinda said, it's more about you're filling a gap, you're attempting to fill a training need or a research education need. So you need to justify it. In the NOFO, we don't lay out any very specific areas, as Kalinda mentioned, but please address this in the rationale.
Thanks, Sadella. Right. Just always think about filling the gap, right? Sure, no problem, Rebecca. Thank you for asking the question. Anything else? It's 4:25. Give 5 minutes back in your busy day. Well, we just want to thank you so much for joining us and for all of your good questions and hanging in there for the whole hour and a half to learn about the new NOFO reissue. And again, like we said, if you have any questions, please reach out to us and we're more than happy to talk to you and try to help you navigate this NOFO reissue. And thank you to Program Grants Management and Review for all being here to share all your insight with our hopefully future applicants. So hope everybody has a lovely day and we will see you later. Thank you very much.